The wind howled through the Appalachian Trail, carrying the scent of pine and the weight of secrets. I stood at the trailhead, my boots sinking into the damp earth, watching Ethan adjust his backpack with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted himself a day in his life. My heart raced not from the climb ahead, but from the unspoken truth I'd buried for years. I was in love with my best friend, and he didn't have a clue. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder, his grin wide and unguarded. Ready to conquer this beast? Caleb. His voice was warm, like the Georgia sun we'd left behind in Atlanta. I nodded, forcing a smile, my stomach twisting as his touch lingered a second too long. We'd been friends since high school, bonded over late-night video games and shared dreams of escaping our small-town lives. Ethan was the golden boy quarterback, prom king, the guy every girl wanted and every guy envied. I was the quiet artist, always sketching in the margins, always watching him a little too closely. He was straight, or so I thought, and I'd spent years convincing myself that loving him was a one-way street. This hiking trip was supposed to be our last big adventure before he moved to Chicago for a job. A final chance to soak up his presence before distance made my feelings irrelevant. The trail stretched before us, a winding path through Tennessee's Smoky Mountains, all jagged peaks and whispering forests. We hiked in companionable silence at first, the crunch of leaves underfoot mingling with the rhythm of our breaths. Ethan talked about his new job, his excitement tinged with nerves. I listened, sketching mental portraits of his animated face, storing them for the lonely nights ahead. You ever think about what's next for you, Caleb? He asked, pausing to sip from his water bottle. His eyes caught mine, bright and searching, and for a moment, I swore he saw right through me. Next, I shrugged, kicking a pebble down the path. Guess I'll keep painting. Maybe sell some pieces. Stay in Atlanta. You know. He frowned, like my answer disappointed him. You're too good for that town. Man, you should be in New York, showing your art to the world. I laughed, brushing off the compliment, but my chest tightened. Ethan always believed in me more than I believed in myself. It was part of why I loved him. His faith in me felt like sunlight after a long winter. But it also hurt, knowing he'd never see me the way I saw him. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, we reached a clearing with a view that stole my breath. The mountains rolled out like a promise, vast and untamed. Ethan dropped his pack and stretched, his shirt riding up to reveal a sliver of tanned skin. I looked away, heat creeping up my neck. Let's camp here, he said, already pulling out the tent. This spot's perfect. We worked together to set up camp, our movements practiced from years of trips like this. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. Maybe it was the way his laugh sounded softer, more intimate, as we shared a thermos of coffee under the stars. After dinner burnt hot dogs and slightly stale buns, we sat by the fire, the crackle of wood filling the silence. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, staring at the sky. You ever feel like you're hiding something from everyone? He asked, his voice low, almost lost in the night. My pulse quickened. I wanted to spill everything, to tell him how every glance, every touch, every laugh from him had built a fire in me I couldn't put out. But I didn't. Sometimes, I said, staring into the flames. You. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was barely a whisper. Yeah. All the time. I turned to him, and the look in his eyes stopped me cold. There was something raw there, something I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or longing. Before I could process it, he stood abruptly, brushing dirt off his jeans. I'm beat. Let's crash. We crawled into the tent, the space feeling smaller than usual. Our sleeping bags were close. Too close. And I could hear his steady breathing as I lay awake, wrestling with the ache in my chest. I thought about his question, about hiding, and wondered what secrets he carried. Did he know how I felt? Was he starting to feel something too? The night deepened, and I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of his hand brushing mine, his breath warm against my skin. When I woke, the tent was still dark, but Ethan was awake, sitting up, his silhouette sharp against the faint moonlight filtering through the fabric. "Caleb," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You awake?" "Yeah," I croaked, my heart pounding. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he reached out, his hand finding mine in the dark. His touch was tentative at first, then firm, like he'd made a decision he couldn't take back. My breath caught as his fingers laced with mine. And when I looked at him, his eyes were wide, vulnerable, and burning with something I'd only dared to imagine. "Ethan," I started, but he shook his head, silencing me. "Don't," he said softly. "Just let me." And then, in the quiet of that Tennessee night, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine with a tenderness that shattered every wall I'd built. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a confession, a question, a promise. My best friend, the straight guy I'd loved in secret, was kissing me like he'd never been straight to begin with. The kiss lingered, soft and searing, like the moment before a storm breaks. I pulled back, my heart hammering, searching Ethan's face for answers. His eyes held mine, wide with a mix of fear and certainty, as if he'd crossed a line he'd been towing for years. "Ethan," what I started, but my voice cracked, betraying me. "I don't know," he whispered, his hand still gripping mine. I needed to do that." The air in the tent felt charged, every breath heavy with the weight of what had just happened. I wanted to ask a million questions. Why now? What did this mean? Was this real? But his thumb brushed over my knuckles, and the tenderness in that small gesture silenced me. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. We didn't sleep after that. We lay side by side, hands still clasped, staring at the tent's ceiling as the world outside held its breath. Ethan spoke first, his voice low and halting. "I've been thinking about this for a while. Caleb. About you." My chest tightened. "How long?" He laughed, a shaky sound. "Too long. Maybe always." He told me about the moments he'd tried to ignore, the way his heart raced when I laughed, the way he'd catch himself staring at me during our late-night talks. He'd chalked it up to friendship, to admiration, to anything but what it was. But out here, away from the noise of expectations, something had shifted. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I don't know what this makes me, but I know I don't want to lose you." I squeezed his hand, my throat tight. "You won't lose me, Ethan. Not ever." Morning came too soon, the sunlight creeping through the tent flaps like an intruder. We packed up in silence, but it wasn't the comfortable quiet of yesterday. It was heavy, loaded with unspoken promises and fears. As we hiked deeper into the mountains, the trail grew steeper, the air thinner, mirroring the tension between us. Ethan walked ahead, his shoulders tense, and I wondered if he regretted the kiss. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him back to that moment in the dark. But doubt gnawed at me. What if this was a fluke? A fleeting impulse he'd bury once we returned to civilization. At noon, we stopped by a stream, the water glittering like shattered glass. Ethan sat on a rock, staring at the current, his jaw tight. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside him. He didn't look at me. "I don't know what I'm doing, Caleb. I've never, I've always been with girls. This feels right." but it also feels like I'm breaking some rule I didn't even know I signed up for. His honesty cut deep, but it also lit something in me. I reached out, resting my hand on his arm. There's no rulebook out here. Just us. He turned to me then, his eyes softening. Just us, he echoed. And when he leaned in to kiss me again, it was slower, more deliberate, like he was claiming something he'd denied himself for too long. The rest of the day passed in a blur of stolen glances and hesitant touches. We laughed more freely, our banter lighter. But there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither of us was ready to name. By nightfall, we'd reached a higher ridge, the stars sharper and closer than I'd ever seen. We set up camp again, and as we sat by the fire, Ethan's hand found mine, his fingers tracing patterns on my palm. I keep thinking about Chicago, he said, his voice quiet. About leaving you behind. My heart sank. You're still going, aren't you? He nodded, his expression torn. It's a good job. A great one. But now, I don't know how to leave you. I wanted to beg him to stay, to tell him I'd follow him anywhere. But I swallowed the words. Instead, I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder, and we watched the fire dance. For now, this was enough: the warmth of his body, the weight of his confession, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could be more. But the mountains didn't care about our feelings. The next morning, the trail threw us a curveball. A storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the sun, and the path turned slick with mud. We pressed on, determined to reach the next checkpoint. But the rain was relentless, soaking us to the bone. Ethan slipped on a steep incline, his foot catching on a root, and I grabbed his arm just in time to keep him from tumbling down the slope. Shit, he gasped, clinging to me, his face pale. That was close. Too close, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't let go of him, even as we steadied ourselves. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, and his eyes locked on mine, raw and unguarded. Caleb, he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. I don't want to lose this. Not you. Not this feeling. Before I could respond, a crack of thunder split the sky, and we scrambled for cover under a rocky overhang. Huddled together, drenched and shivering, I felt his arm wrap around me, pulling me close. It wasn't just about warmth, it was about holding on, about choosing each other in the middle of the chaos. The storm raged for hours, trapping us under the overhang, our bodies pressed close for warmth. Ethan's arm stayed around me, his breath steady against my neck, and I clung to the moment, terrified it would slip away with the rain. When the clouds finally parted, the forest was reborn in emerald and gold. But the air between us felt heavier, weighted with questions we hadn't dared to ask. We hiked on, the trail now a muddy gauntlet. But Ethan's mood had shifted. He was quieter, his glances less certain, and I felt the distance growing with every step. Had the storm washed away his courage? Or was he wrestling with the same fear I'd carried for years, that loving someone like this could cost too much? By midday, we reached a fork in the trail. One path led to a scenic overlook, the other to a shortcut back to the trailhead. Ethan stopped, staring at the signpost like it held the answers to his life. Which way? He asked, his voice tight. I wanted the overlook, the chance to stretch this trip and use out a little longer. But I saw the conflict in his eyes, the way he was pulling back. Your call, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He chose the shortcut. My heart sank, but I followed, each step feeling like a countdown to the end of whatever we'd started. The silence between us grew oppressive, broken only by the squelch of our boots in the mud. I couldn't take it anymore. Ethan, talk to me, I said, stopping in the middle of the path. What's going on? Last night. We. He turned. His face a storm of emotions. I don't know how to do this. Caleb. I've spent my whole life being the guy everyone expects strong. Straight. In control. And now, you make me feel things I didn't think I could. His words hit like a punch. Equal parts hope and pain. So what does that mean? You kiss me. You hold me. And now you're just done. No. He snapped, stepping closer. I'm not done. I'm just scared. I don't know who I am if I let myself feel this. My family. My friends, they won't get it. Hell, I don't get it. I wanted to shake him, to tell him it didn't matter what anyone else thought. But I saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear I'd felt coming out to my parents. The fear of losing the world you'd built. So I softened, stepping closer until we were inches apart. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just don't shut me out. He looked at me, his eyes searching, and then he pulled me into a hug. Fierce and desperate. I'm trying. Caleb. I swear I'm trying. The rest of the hike was a blur. Our emotions as tangled as the roots underfoot. We reached the trailhead by dusk, our car waiting like a reminder of the real world. As we drove back to Atlanta, the city lights flickering in the distance. Ethan reached for my hand, his grip tight. I don't want this to end here, he said, his voice raw. But I need time. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Time was the one thing I wasn't sure I could give him, not when every moment without him felt like a slow bleed. Back in Atlanta, the weight of reality settled in. Ethan's move to Chicago loomed, just days away. We spent those days in a strange limbo, caught between the intimacy of the trail and the uncertainty of what came next. We grabbed coffee, watched old movies, laughed like we used to. But every touch, every glance, carried a new meaning. One night, at my apartment, Ethan showed up unannounced, his eyes red-rimmed. I told my brother, he said, his voice shaking. About us. About me. My heart stopped. What did he say? He didn't get it. Said I was confused, that I just needed to meet the right girl. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. But I don't want a girl. Caleb, I want you. I pulled him inside, and we sat on my couch, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. He told me about his fears losing his family's approval, being seen differently, navigating a world he didn't understand. I listened, my hand on his, and shared my own story coming out. The rejection, the slow rebuilding of my life. You're not alone in this. I said, whatever happens, I'm here. He kissed me then, not with the urgency of the trail, but with a quiet resolve. Like he was choosing me despite the cost. We fell asleep tangled together. And for the first time, I let myself believe we could make this work. But the next morning, Ethan was gone. No note. No text. Just an empty space where he'd been. Panic clawed at me as I called him. Texted him. Got nothing but silence. Had he run? Had I pushed too far? I spent the day pacing my apartment, replaying every moment, every word. Ethan's absence was a wound, raw and unrelenting. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to his place, my heart in my throat, ready to demand answers or beg him to stay whatever it took. His apartment was dark, the door unlocked. I found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, his face buried in his hands. Ethan, I said, my voice breaking. He looked up, his eyes wet. I'm sorry. Caleb. I freaked out. I didn't know how to face you after last night. I knelt beside him, anger and relief warring inside me. You can't just disappear like that. Not after everything. I know. he said, his voice raw. I'm terrified. I've never felt this way about anyone. And it's messing with my head. But I don't want to lose you. I can't. I took his hand, my own trembling. Then don't. Stay? Or let me come with you. We'll figure it out together. He laughed. A broken sound. You'd move to Chicago for me. In a heartbeat. I said. And I meant it. He pulled me into his arms. And we stayed like that, surrounded by the chaos of his half-packed life, holding on like we could anchor each other against the world. Over the next few days, we really talked about what this meant, about the challenges we'd face. Ethan wasn't ready to come out to everyone, and I didn't push him, but he was ready to try, to build something real with me. The day he left for Chicago, I drove him to the airport. The goodbye was quiet, heavy with promise and uncertainty. This isn't the end, he said, kissing me softly. It's just the start. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. Call me when you land. He did. And every day after that, we made it work long-distance calls, weekend visits, late-night texts filled with dreams and fears. Ethan started opening up, first to a few friends, then to his coworkers, each step a small victory. I sent him sketches, little pieces of my heart, and he hung them in his new apartment, a reminder of us. Months later, I flew to Chicago. Ethan met me at the airport, his grin brighter than the city skyline. We walked along Lake Michigan, hand in hand, the wind carrying the promise of something new. He wasn't the same golden boy I'd fallen for, was more flawed and brave, choosing love over fear. As we stood by the water, the city lights reflecting around us, Ethan pulled me close. I'm glad I touched you that night, he said, his voice steady. It changed everything. I smiled, my heart full. It changed me too. Our story wasn't perfect. There were still battles to fight: family, society, our own doubts. But standing there, with Ethan's hand in mine, I knew we'd face them together. Love wasn't a destination. It was the courage to keep walking, even when the path was steep. And we were walking it, one step at a time, into a future we'd build together.